Do you want to kill this audio and start over?
No.
Okay, great. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. National team's back. Emma Hayes is in charge edition. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Yes, what once was theory is now practice. We have tape on what an Emma Hayes U.S. women's national team looks like.
All right, Evan, before we even hop in, I want a letter grade that you give these two friendlies combined, the first two friendlies of the Emma Hayes era.
A-.
I think I'd go B+, but A- is, I'm cuspy there.
Yeah.
And I bet for similar reasons.
Let's talk a little bit about big picture. The reason I think my grade swings into the A- area is the way in which expectations, I think, were incredibly well managed for this international window. It was the thing that when Hayes was announced as the hire, we talked about a lot, which is this program might have to write off the Olympics. It might have to make sure that fans in the punditocracy and media partners and players themselves all understood that this was not going to happen overnight, that it was going to be a process. And Hayes needed to make sure that she got that right for the general public. That was an incredibly well-shaped collection of messaging, I think, throughout the entire week. Every time Hayes was in front of a microphone, hell, every time a player was in front of a microphone, what's the word that you heard the most? Process. Over and over and over again. Everybody was just talking about how everything that they are doing is part of a process. It's about eventually achieving goals that are further down the line. She gave this incredible long quote in her post-match presser after the second game. She talked about how there are going to be a lot of brains that were hurting based on the massive amount of information that she put on their plate. She said, we've got to go one step at a time. We're building something here. It was a good start. And I think the money quote, which is from her pre-match presser, is, the expectation in this country is win every game, every week, every tournament, every trophy. It just isn't going to work like that, I'm afraid. That's a massive paradigm shift from the way that this program usually presents itself to the world. And it's absolutely what is required to ensure that the goal of winning the World Cup in 2027 is achieved. As such, any bumps in the road across these two friendlies that I saw really felt like they fell into that rubric of, we're working on stuff, not all of it's going to come off, but that's how this is all going to work. And that's what we are always talking about, too, when it comes to the national team. It's performance, it's development over short-term reward. That's how Hayes is framing all of this. That's how the players seem to be internalizing all of it. I think that is an important lens through which to view the way that the team performed over these last two friendlies.
I think I probably am downgrading it ever so slightly. I take all of that on board, and basically you've convinced me it's A-. I think the things that I have found frustrating, they probably dock this. First, this persistent inclusion of Corbin Albert, who I think actually didn't distinguish herself as a player. And the situation is just not being handled very well.
Julie Foudy on the broadcast, she's the mouthpiece from the locker room to the general public. The word salad that she spewed during the broadcast in game one about all of this was nonsense. If that's your messaging to the broadest possible audience, which is the U.S. television audience, you fucked up. You fucked up so hard. What the hell is she doing there? It was also funny to watch how Commerce City, Colorado booed her ass when she came in.
There was some boos when she was subbed off in St. Paul that existed there. I suppose my question is just like, why a Corbin Albert if you bring in a Hal Hirschfeld and then don't really blood a Hal Hirschfeld?
Or a Lily Johannes until the absolute last moment in game two, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I downgrade that.
Somebody actually pointed this out to us on Twitter, was that her jersey number got changed from number 15 to number 5, which was very clearly Megan Rapinoe calling Matt Crocker, being like, better fucking fix this. But then somebody on Twitter pointed out, it's like, yeah, Kelly O'Hara used to be number 5.
Yeah.
Like, it's just insulting the queer femme community from every fucking corner.
The beliefs that Corbin Albert has espoused, and boy, this isn't really what I wanted to talk about, or the things that she's reposted are just sort of non-starters. They are divisive, hurtful, awful things, ill-considered, I'm sure. But the PR handling of it as a sort of valid approach for someone who holds Corbin Albert's position to hold. There just is this tolerance that sort of boils my blood a little bit. And I think that we should be past that, at least with the U.S. women's national team. And of course we aren't.
Every time somebody inside U.S. soccer, whether it's a player, coach, whatever, has spoken about an issue like this, it always comes back to how strong their culture is inside the locker room. When this all went down initially and Morgan and Horan went in front of the press and said, this has been handled internally and that's all we're going to say about it. And any time that Albert gets a hug from another player or smiles are thrown her way or she seems to be really included, what does that mean? Are we really meant to believe that she no longer feels like Megan Rapinoe deserves to go to hell? How does Tierna Davidson put on a smile and hug Corbin Albert? I genuinely want to know. Maybe there really has been accountability and reconciliation in there, and everybody is rowing in the same direction. But if they're rowing in the same direction, basically to just sweep these problems under the rug so they can stay focused on their primary objective, that's not a healthy culture.
I want Corbin Albert to go through the sort of soul-searching and life lesson that undoubtedly she's been served through this experience. I just don't think it has to happen on the national team.
Yeah, and also maybe she's learned a lesson. It's not clear at all that she has. I mean, nothing's happened to Albert. Nothing negative has happened to Albert except maybe some of her teammates behind the scenes gave her a talking to. I have internalized just how badly the program has handled all of it that it didn't even occur to me to be like really mad. And now that we're talking about this, I'm really getting fucking mad.
It's the first stick in it for me. And I think the second is, and I know that Emma Hayes has to do some PRing around the Alex Morgan situation, but the deference to stardom that I thought Emma Hayes might have the clout to get past, it seems like she doesn't.
I don't know. Sorry. I'm putting a pin in that. Could not agree with you less. I think Alex Morgan had to play because she needed to see Alex Morgan with her own two eyes. I'm not convinced Alex Morgan ever plays 45 minutes for this team ever again.
Sure, fair. The post-match after game 2, that's about as dismissive as you'll ever hear a coach be about a player's performance and the way in which they fit in the team. So let's actually just talk about the games themselves. Getting into it, how excited are you for the, what do we call them?
The great Tamara Griffin over at The Athletic solicited input for a name for the three of them. And there were some good ones. Yeah, the Holy Trinity was in there. Snap, Crackle, Pop was in there, which I thought was fun. They were what was promised for 2023 for the World Cup. And obviously, Swanson's injury, Macario's injury, I'd include Macario in that group. Their two injuries blew all of those plans to bits. I don't know how opposing defenses deal with them when they're on the field at the same time.
Certainly South Korea did not have good answers.
No.
When you think about the incredible wealth of talent that the United States have, what do you want out of your attacking players? And I think interchanging mobility, incisive play, speed, power. When you have Swanson, Smith, and Rodman on the field together, that is what you get. And you get it from each of them and in sort of variations on the same theme. But they are all so good, so dynamic, so dangerous, so inventive that defenses don't really have a single way to stop them.
Yeah.
You saw on the Swanson opener, Sophia Smith really just read very quickly the way in which South Korea sort of swarmed to her the minute she had the ball edge of the box, and Swanson read it immediately and make just that perfect diagonal. Mm-hmm. And then Smith just lay it off to her, and the Colorado connection, cracked on. It was all quick thinking.
And the reason that Smith had a pocket of space to receive and release in the first place was because that interchange pulled defenders out of shape and allowed Smith to move in.
That's exactly
And
right.
then defenders are completely confused as to what they're supposed to do, and so they can't read Swanson's diagonal slashing run toward the far post. Jaden Shaw had a chance, not an especially great one at the end of the day because it was a shot at the top of the box, but in the 65th minute of game number 2, which I thought really sort of emblematized what these friendlies were all about, because for the first 60 minutes of the game, in the second game, Alex Morgan had started at number 9, and team didn't look very good. Shaw looked very uncomfortable, didn't seem to know exactly like where she fit in space or how she could make movements or do interchanges. Morgan was continually dropping really deep to do hold-up play that didn't actually really do anything when she did get the ball, and it was rare when she did. When Morgan and Rose Lavelle came off, it was actually a very funny, beautifully composed shot that the camera person got on the touchline when all three of them were about to check in. That chance that I'm talking about with Shaw, which comes entirely from Swanson and Smith running rampant with Shaw on the left side, pulling everybody out of shape. That happens 3 minutes after those players show up on the field. And yes, eventually Shaw doesn't end up having a good shot, so it's ultimately not a good chance, but that set up what we saw 2 minutes later when Smith scored. It's that level of final third play that has just been sorely missing from the U.S. for a very long time. When the three of them are working together, it just didn't seem to stop. And yes, it's not going to be as relentless against Germany or Australia or Japan or Brazil or Spain or whomever, but it's the building block of how it can be effective against top squads like that.
I think that the word here is unpredictable. That when you have Alex Morgan in the 9, the United States becomes very predictable. Or if it has variation on that, it is Morgan doing something like dropping incredibly deep and losing the forward thrust of attack. And there being problems connecting between the midfield and the front line. Mm-hmm. It becomes more easily defended. Now, the first goal on the 4th in that game comes from Morgan dropping deep, taking a long dribble, and then playing out wide. But it is such a slow buildup.
Yeah.
It is, and I know that there's downpour in St. Paul, but for a team that has pace, it is shockingly slow. And then Niswanger's cross has to take a deflection and then be not handled by 3 separate South Korean players for Crystal Dunn to arrive on the spot. It's just like that ball should have never gotten to Dunn.
3 things I thought about with that goal. One is your point, the incredibly slow buildup that a German back line or a Brazilian back line are not going to be that slow to track back and recover the way that South Korea were. That kind of dribble that Morgan makes might come to nothing against a different opponent. Secondly, Julie Foudy pointed out during the replay, Dunn was wide open on the right side because the left back was sucked in. So I thought that Morgan would play the pass out to Dunn. And instead she goes to Niswanger, who immediately has 2 players on her and forces the deflection. There's decision-making that you have to ask yourself about. And then the third thing is when Dunn crashes the back post to score the goal, Morgan is slicing across the box to try and receive the pass herself and almost runs into Dunn. Morgan just seemed to always be in a place where somebody either was already or where somebody wanted to go and they couldn't because she was there. I watched specifically Shaw in those final 30 minutes after the Trident came on because I wanted to see how differently she performed and how differently she felt relative to playing with Morgan. And it really was night and day. And the other thing about that 65th minute chance that comes to nothing, Hayes in her post-match presser after Tuesday talked a lot about patience and about controlling games, which I think was also something that Vlatko Andonovski was interested in and could never get to work properly. And why also I kind of am giving Hayes a pass for whatever clunky on-field stuff may have happened over the first couple of games, because it seemed like game number 1 was, all right, guys, we are going to work on hyper counter-pressing, aggression, super high lines, penetrating low blocks. That's what we're going to work on today. On Tuesday, it seemed very clear that it was, okay, guys, we are going to work on playing out of the back, connecting passes, being patient, trying to thread things together and keep our foot on the ball. Didn't always look great. Some of that was Morgan's fault. It wasn't all Morgan's fault. I think this team is trying to figure out how they're going to make possession work. But Hayes, she says it quite directly, quote, "You cannot compete at the very top level in a transitional game. The top teams in the world will pick us off and will spend the game running. We will lack control. And when you lack control, you're doing more running. You can't play a consistent team again and again. Why? Because physically, it's going to be so demanding." A pure transitional style, according to Hayes, we can potentially disagree with it, but according to Hayes, isn't going to be functional for 6 games across a 17-day window. It seemed like they were just trying to do what she was asking them to do. It was a bit stodgy, but when Swanson, Rodman, and Smith came on, it wasn't like it was automatically all of a sudden just a track meet. So that 65th minute Shaw chance, if you count both sequences on either side of the throw-in in that, it's a 19-pass sequence. It's not just one of Smith or Rodman or Swanson taking somebody on 1v1 and trying to create a shot for themselves or lay a pass off if the shot for themselves isn't open. It seemed coordinated. It seemed aware of combination opportunities and was not simply run at top speed for running at top speed's sake. There was thought behind it. And it seems to be the version of, because we talk about possession so much on the show, it's the version of attacking possession that makes sense. When you can use one-touch passing and unpredictable off-ball running and interchange to pull defenses apart. And if you can string 19 passes together and potentially get Shaw into a better spot in the box where she can get a better shot off, then you are well on your way to making something like this work. That's what made me stop and think, okay, this is actually potentially going to be really, really successful here, what she's attempting to do.
The Smith-Swanson opener, if I go back to that, to just encapsulate what you're talking about, the reason Smith draws so much attention so quickly, in addition to where she is on the field, is she is such an elite dribbler. And you just don't want her to get slaloming.
Right.
And so it forces the defense out. The reason that goal occurs is because Smith wisely understands that I'm going to two-touch this. I'm essentially going to collect and play through. That is where chances come from. I mean, could Sophia Smith have beaten 5 defenders? Yes, we've absolutely seen her do it before. It just isn't the most efficient way. And when you have other people, the threat of her doing that is what opens up opportunities. I think that you can sort of extend that truth. All of them possess such high-level transitional abilities and one-on-one technical abilities that when they take the ball, the defender's first concern has to be about being beaten by them, and it opens up a well of opportunities for them to instead 1- and 2-touch passes between each other because they are constantly cycling and in motion. When the U.S. failed to break down low blocks at the World Cup last summer, it was because that movement didn't really exist in the same way.
That's right.
And it wasn't that these players didn't have the technique or the technical ability. It's just that they had to rely on it. Instead, what you really want is players who have the technical ability to do magical things one-on-one and then them not need to rely on it.
And also possess the ability to slice open a center back pairing with a through ball or take the ball end line and then cut it back for someone on rushing into the 6-yard area. I mean, Trinity Rodman, if you average together the expected assist models from ASA, FBref, and Y-Scout, those 4 models, Trinity Rodman's expected assists per 96 minutes is 0.35. That is insane. And Swanson and Smith, while considerably lower than that, are still excellent in this category. It's exactly as you say. If you are a backline, you have to worry about so many different things when the 3 of them are on the field, particularly in the way that Hayes is setting up the in-possession structure of the team. She is completely devoted to a modified 3-4-3 when they have the ball. And also with the fluidity of the interchange with the front court, it gives them extra bodies in places of the field that can, again, pull that shape apart or get passes through areas where they might not have been able to get them through, say, last summer. The way it sort of looks is, at times, it looks like a 3-4-2-1 with a box midfield and the wingbacks pushing up into winger territory, and then one of those midfielders at the top of the box moving up into a forward position while a wingback drops deep, and then another player moving out wide. It's always moving. It's always changing.
I always think of it as the rule of you have 5 attacking channels, and you need those filled. A classic 4-3-3, which became a big deal of late. People love it because you have your 3 attackers, and then behind them in almost a W shape, you have 2 midfielders or a midfielder and a fullback if one of the attackers dips in, sort of filling these 5 channels and then giving you this depth of shape that allows you to pass into it many different ways. I think what you're getting at is this 3-4-3 that she's conceiving of is both so much in motion that there is never a channel that isn't filled by someone who can threaten.
That's right. And she's making a very calculated trade-off, too, when she always leaves one of the wingbacks at home because she is so aware of good teams potentially playing in behind that she doesn't want to expose to counterattacks. So she's abandoning a wing. Game 2, it was Jenna Neiswanger staying home for a lot of the time. And any width on the left would come piecemeal. More of it came when Smith got on the field at the end of the game. In game number 1, it was Neiswanger again. There's never loss of shape even when they play risky. And when you overload a channel, it opens up space. You have Swanson in game 1 playing on the left side of that double 10 to give Neiswanger potential crossing opportunities. If Neiswanger doesn't want to go, or if the pass isn't on, then Swanson pushes up into the forward line, and then on the other side, you have Rodman who can either pinch in and form the double 10 with Macario, and you create a left-sided overload, or you swing it around, and then you have Rodman pushing up while Swanson and Macario kind of slide over, and then you have a right channel overload. Because they're always in motion and always moving spots, or depending on play phase, just have different assignments or responsibilities, which still keeps the defense on their toes. You can never get comfortable. You can never get set if you're a defender against dealing with that. Compare it to what the 60 minutes with Morgan was like. Her marker, who was captain on the day, Kim Kye-ri, didn't look like she broke a sweat very much throughout the day. Didn't seem all that particularly stressed or chuffed that Morgan was going to be able to get in behind her or create wrinkles of space where another player that could run into. Never really felt like there was that stress from Kim Kye-ri dealing with Alex Morgan. There was so much stress among that Korean back line when it was Swanson, Smith, and Rodman in place.
And it's funny because everything you've just described tactically is the pretext to the decisions that defenders are forced to make. And that's really where you break teams, is quick analysis of where defenders are forced to make choices. The best an attack can do is force bad choices. Mm-hmm. Constant bad choices, domino rally effect, cascading bad choices. When you have unpredictable, interchanging, organized attack, you're just forcing defenses so many problems at the same time, and bad choices sort of can't help but be made. And when you become predictable, when you even have so much as a single player becoming really predictable, that has a knock-on effect the other direction, and the defense can remain quite organized. Mm-hmm. And when you see these really high-level games between extraordinary possession teams, overwhelming talent teams, where you see that disparity in talent, what sort of breaks the will the parked bus be annihilated situation is how bad did the bus get dragged out of shape? How many pieces were torn off of it and how many holes were made into it? And when you have unpredictable players and when you have everyone being unpredictable, the effect, it compounds and becomes greater pressure. And when you have a predictable player who a defender can assess quickly and then not worry about in the same way, the defense is so much stronger and therefore able to deal with everyone else making unpredictable choices. We talk about it as if this, I'm talking sort of in a broader scale than just Alex Morgan in this situation, because I don't think that's fair to Alex Morgan in a 60-some-odd minute wet Tuesday in St. Paul.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's fair to put all of that onto her. But what you saw is when a team is at 1-0 and very predictable, because a central player is allowing the defenders to refocus their attention on every other aspect of the attack coming in, you're reliant on a cross that has to beat 3 people and that the keeper probably should have claimed, and that ends up, no one was more surprised than Crystal Dunn at the back post for that ball to get there. That isn't the byproduct of excellent offensive organization. That's the byproduct of essentially a total mental lapse and a bit of good fortune. And what Emma Hayes, who can enjoy that goal rightfully, is trying to do is make sure that we have goals that open up games that look a lot more like what we saw over the weekend than what we saw opening the game in St. Paul.
Yeah, don't lay it all at Morgan's feet, but it is the knock-on effect, right? Because so much more attention can get put on Shaw and Lavelle that they were not especially effective in that first half.
All right, let's go to the squad and what we think it is and what we think it should be, both extrapolating from sort of what we saw Emma Hayes do in these two friendlies. Let's go into banged on, undisputed starters. In ink players headed to this tournament. You and I will see if we disagree.
If we set the goalkeeper position aside for a second, just look at outfield players, I'd say that 7 of the 10, the starting 10, are in ink for me.
Why don't we just go down the line? So we agree that if Alyssa Nair is healthy, she's probably the in-ink starter.
Yeah.
And if not, it is one of Jane Campbell.
Or Casey Murphy.
At center back, I don't think there's any question. It's Naomi Girma. She got the captain's armband. Tierna Davidson did nothing to not secure a spot in these two performances, regardless of what you think about corner kick goals. Although I thought Sam Staub was really good.
I was going to ask about Staub.
Just to interject this, you know who had the Fox in the Box chance in game 2? It wasn't Alex Morgan, it was Sam Staub. And she nearly scored on her first start, second cap. Considering that she had never been capped before, I thought she put together like 2 pretty massive. Like if there were an outsider who did more to improve their stock, I don't know who it is.
I would agree with that. The game that she started, she went 6 for 9 on long balls. You know what she can do with that left foot. So having her potentially side alongside Girma gives you progression options out of the back, especially if trying to keep it on the deck isn't working. She's there to lay it on a plate at 40 or more yards. I thought she made a couple of good stops. It didn't seem like her positioning was too bad. I think I still lean Davidson, but I like the idea of Staub. I right now have her as an alternate, but if she got picked, I would not be upset about that.
My hot take, you can agree or disagree with this, but it's because it's a little out there, is that Sam Staub was called in because Emma Hayes has every intention of taking Sam Staub club player to the Olympics if it turns out Sam Staub club player is also Sam Staub national team player.
Yeah, maybe.
And she wanted to see that, and I felt like she probably saw that. It would not surprise me if Sam Staub not only makes this team, but ends up starting some games in the Olympics. That is a hot take that would be a meteoric rise, but hey, long overdue.
It would be a big swing from Hayes to do that. I think that even though she has said more or less that I don't really care about winning Olympic gold, I think she does still want to put in some respectable performances. And I think in her mind, when she talks about process and getting everybody on the same page, Girma and Davidson just have more time together. And so I think that probably gives Davidson the spot. But if Staub gets picked for the 18, I could see that happening. Absolutely could see that happening.
All right, let's keep moving down the list. I think we both think Sam Coffey's in ink. I was a little concerned about her not sort of being deployed on Tuesday in the same kind of way, but I actually think that's to her advantage.
And what do you mean by deployed differently?
I was concerned that we didn't see her as much, but I think it's because she already locked herself in.
I did not read into her not starting on Tuesday as anything other than just managing her minutes. And that's the other part about Rodman, Swanson, and Smith all coming on at the same moment. Coffey came on too, and the fluidity of midfield progression, night and day, when she showed up. And also gave the team much more comfort for certain pundits that don't think Sam Coffey can play in a single pivot. Sam Coffey can play in single pivot. And that gave Corbin Albert a lot more freedom to join in the attack and not feel like she had to stay home so often. And that's really, really valuable. And then if you play Horan and Coffey together, that's the ideal. That's the vision of this team. The bottom of the box, it should be Coffey and Horan.
All right, so let's keep moving down the list. Sam Coffey, Sharpie, Lindsay Horan, blood, like written in stone.
Especially playing with 2 attacking midfielders in front of her and playing with Coffey alongside her frees her to just be herself. Because so much of what made her frustrating last year was that she felt she had to take on so many more responsibilities because they weren't being taken by other people.
She literally did have to do that, actually.
She's not a number 10, even though that she can play there and like you can respectably field her there. You want her tracking back, winning the ball, and also moving in the other direction and being available to crash the box without necessarily having to be the playmaker herself. She just looked so much more comfortable when she played with Coffey.
Anyway, let's move down the line. We all agree Swanson, Rodman, Smith. It would be a travesty if any of those players missed out for anything other than an injury.
It would be a travesty if they made the 18 and didn't start at any point other than to save them at the back of the group stage for the knockouts or something. They have to be your inning starters. They have to be.
One game, everything on the line, starter. They are your gold medal match. That should be your 3. And I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room there in my mind. Let's go to where it gets more complicated.
Yeah, there are 3 areas in the field where I haven't made up my mind yet. It's both wide defenders, whether they are fullbacks or wingbacks or alternate center backs in possession back 3, And number 10. For outside back, we have Jenna Neiswanger, Emily Fox, and Casey Kruger, I think, are the legitimate options there. For number 10, we have Jaden Shaw, Rose Lavelle, Katerina Macario, Olivia Moultrie, Croy Bethune, who got brought into the training squad even though she didn't dress for either of the games. But it's just been so insanely good in her rookie year that you can't not pay attention to her. So it's those 5 that are on the table for me for that spot. And the way it's structured right now, if it's going to be this 3-4-3 box midfield, floaty, interchangey thing, that means Mallory Swanson's going to spend some time at the 10 while also kicking out on the wing. Rose Lavelle is going to do the same thing on the other side. You can chop and change and maneuver so that it doesn't have to feel so stodgy like there's just one central playmaker around which everything is built, but it's still those 5. Swanson, doesn't matter how you deploy her, she's going to be there, and left wing is going to be spot number 1. So it's those 5 that I think we have to figure out how it all goes together. So for myself, I would be taking Shaw, Lavelle, and Macario. I would be taking all 3 of them. And to start, I think I lean Macario.
I am not totally convinced at this point that we'll see an authentic number 10 from Emma Hayes. I do agree that I think all of those players are probably going. Rose Lavelle, oddly enough, I actually think made the worst case for herself over this little stretch, but it would be hard to imagine.
I thought she was good on Saturday, less so on Tuesday.
Yeah, I just think that like Jaden Shaw was in a tough place, but obviously her larger resume over this year, it would just be a missed opportunity to not have her extended. And obviously, Emma Hayes bought Katerina Macario. We know how she feels about Katerina Macario. Katerina Macario did little to not help her position.
Yeah, she was great on Saturday. The only thing you worry about with Macario is fitness. Is she truly 90 minutes ready now? Or at the very least 70 minutes ready, knowing that Shaw can come off the bench or whoever can come off the bench to spell her. So if Saturday is the trend and not the outlier, then she's right as rain.
Well, let's hop on to this next position. What's happening at left back?
I mean, it seems like it's Neiswanger's to lose, right? She started both games. I just don't see how you don't take her because, again, we've said it so many times, it frees you to use Crystal Dunn however you want. It does not confine her to left back with Neiswanger being there.
Maybe not in ink starter, but I think Jenna Neiswanger is going. I don't think there's a version of this where Jenna Neiswanger isn't going. I just can't imagine Crystal Dunn not going.
No, but what are we talking about here? Are we talking about her being in the 11 or being in the 18? Those are 2 different conversations.
I think we're moving toward the 18 because let's finish the 11.
Yeah, I think we need to start there. I'm moving Neiswanger into the 11 after what we've just discussed. Now it's starting right back / right wing back / wide center back and number 10.
I think Casey Kruger had herself some games.
I think you're right. I
think Casey Kruger is having herself a season.
Yeah. I mean, she's had herself a couple of seasons, to be fair.
I mean, she played a brain-melting ball that no one else saw. I think if what we're looking for is attacking Emma Hayes, defensively solid, also Emma Hayes, Casey Kruger sort of falls into that camp. Oh, Swiss Army knife as well. Casey Kruger sort of falls into that camp of like rangy, good passers, solid with the ball at their feet.
I've been thinking about the fact that 5 players in this international window, Haran, Macario, Emily Fox, Corbin Albert, Lily Johannes, their seasons are over. They just had their last audition. They can't do anything else. And it's not going to matter for Haran. It's not going to really matter for Macario to get into the 18. Not really going to matter for Fox to get into the 18. But to get into the 11, Kruger's got 2 or 3 more games to show Hayes something. Kruger has the opportunity to make a case for herself in the next couple of weeks.
Especially because this team that we're already sort of citing, it's not so young, but it's younger. It's younger than we're accustomed to. I think Casey Kruger provides, for whatever value USS veteran leadership, I think Casey Kruger is that right back position. And I think she played herself into it, and I think she's been playing herself into it, in my mind.
Hayes has also had the chance to see Fox up close of late because of Arsenal, so maybe that will play into it somehow. Maybe Fox's recent experience in major tournaments will play into it somehow. It's very hard to say. Kruger was on the Olympics roster in 2021, but she obviously did not make the World Cup roster in 2023. I don't know. I mean, I think I personally am leaning toward Kruger as well. But I don't know what Hayes is thinking.
It would not surprise me if that is not Hayes' pick, but it would surprise me if Casey Kruger isn't in the 18.
Kruger and Fox, I think, are both on the plane. I think they're both in the 18. We got one more spot for the starting 11. It's that advanced playmaking midfielder, whether it'll operate as a double 10 or it needs to be able to function as a single 10 behind two strikers. It's all flowing, it's all fluid, and Shaw, Lavelle, Macario, Moultrie, Bethune. Who do you take for the 11?
I just buy the idea that it's Macario.
I think it's Macario, too.
Whether I think that's correct or whether I think ultimately any of those 10s will end up starting in favor of someone like a Crystal Dunn, I don't know.
I don't see Dunn starting necessarily from a central position.
I'm just saying I am less certain about that than every other member of the starting 11.
Yes, and if you're listening to this on the day we drop it, Thursday, you can scooch your way over to Backheeled and read Evan Davis writing all about this situation.
Now let's go to the bench. So to recap, Nicewanger at left back, Davidson, Gurma, Kruger, Coffey, Haran, Macario, Swanson, Rodman, Smith.
Boy, that's a good-looking lineup.
It's a really good team.
Really good team.
It's a really good team. Moving on.
These are the players who realistically could make the bench, I think. And maybe there are a couple of others who you could dispute. But those are Emily Sonnet, Emily Fox, Corbin Albert, Crystal Dunn, Jaden Shaw, Rose Lavelle, Lily Johannes, Olivia Moultrie, Sam Staub, Alex Morgan, Croy Bethune, Hal Hirschfeld, Abby Dahlkemper, Alana Cook, and Andy Sullivan. I have picked my 7 bench players and my 4 alternates. Who you got?
I'll tell you what I think. I think Lily Johannes makes the Olympics team.
You think she makes the 18? You think she makes the bench?
I think she makes the bench.
I mean, she certainly made a case for herself. Did you hear Sophia Smith's quote on the television broadcast after the game on Tuesday?
It's kind of that.
She's like, she's making passes no 16-year-old should be able to make.
And I think that it's that. My second hot take, other than I think Sam Staub makes this team, is I think Lily Johannes not only makes this team, but ends up starting a game.
You know what's wild? I didn't realize this until it was pointed out to me the other day, is that the Olympics don't cap tie you.
Oh, God, that's wild.
Johannes could literally become a breakout star for the U.S., win them Olympic gold, and then decide, you know what, I'd rather play for the Netherlands. Isn't that crazy? That is a hot take, and I think that she looked very good.
The goal's fine. The joy, even better. It's the long-range passing and the passing vision. I think she just gives you stuff from a deeper midfield position that Corbin Albert doesn't. And if you're not starting in this 11, which feels pretty locked, I think Lily Johannes is a more interesting choice off the bench.
Not only does FB Ref not have Eredivisie Ruin numbers, but Y-Scout doesn't either. So all we've got to go on statistically for Johannes is her 6 Champions League games last year. Very, very, very small data set. But in that data set, she's a pretty good defender, very, very solid, and the passing is as advertised.
I just think you don't call a Lily Johannes for these kinds of games.
I hedged my bets, and I put her as an alternate. I agree with your point that you just made up to a point. Even though Hayes is building for the future, I think she'll still want to have a bit more senior international experience on her bench, but would be happy to have Johannes waiting in the wings just in case. That's my feeling about it. But it would be bold, and I would love it if Johannes got taken in the 18.
I think Emily Fox is in. I think Crystal Dunn is in. I think Jaden Shaw is in.
Sonnet's in.
I'm like mostly sure Emily Sonnet's in.
I think you have to. I mean, you need a defensive Swiss Army knife just in case.
Yeah, it's the 6 cover that I think does it for me. What I'm saying is I'm not taking Corbin Albert. I'm not taking Lavelle.
You'll take Staub over Lavelle.
Yeah. I mean, that seems insane.
It's a lot of center backs if you throw Sonnet in with the center backs.
It'd
be 4 center backs if you count Sonnet.
That's why I'm, by the way, not convinced about Emily Sonnet.
Yeah.
Going. If I think I'm really doing this, I think I'm taking Sam Staub. I'm leaving Emily Sonnet at home. I think I'm taking Crystal Dunn. I think I'm taking Jaden Shaw. I think I'm taking Rose Lavelle. I think I'm taking Lily Johannes.
You're taking Lavelle?
Yeah.
Okay. I do like that. You know what? I am pushing Johannes into my 18, and I am pushing Albert to my alternates list.
At that point, you're just sort of like, what is the future?
Yeah.
For some reason, I just really think Sam Staub makes this roster, and I don't kind of know how it happens. But I think she does. So let's talk about the alternates.
Let's talk about Moultrie for a little bit. We haven't talked about her yet.
Yeah, I don't know where, this is the question mark. I just don't know where Emma Hayes rates her or where she stands. She had a slow start to the season in Portland. It is getting better. It is looking better. She assisted a goal against Houston that is kind of everything you're looking for in that position. But I wonder if she's just not behind a log jam.
That's it. I mean, that's the reason I wanted to write about this, is like the one position, in my opinion, where there really is a glut of worthy talent is attacking midfield. I mean, hell, if you're so inclined, you could throw Savannah DeMello and Ashley Sanchez into that mix too, and could argue that there are 7 players who could legitimately be on this plane and play in that spot. Your mileage may vary on any of those 7, but I think there are legitimate arguments to be made for any of them. And with Moultrie, for me, she drew the short straw because even though her season has been getting a little bit better, in the aggregate, she is having her worst season since her cup of coffee rookie campaign when she was 15. And it's the passing that's really killing her.
Which is its own insane statement.
That she's having her worst campaign since she was 15. According to Y-Scout, her forward passing percentage has dropped 9 points from last year. According to ASA's X-Pass model, she's making 2 fewer passes than you would expect her to make in the attacking third this year. Last year, she was making, I think, 5 more than you would expect. That's a really significant change. Rob Gale can't really quite figure out what he wants her to do. He's stuck her out on the wing. He's had her at number 9. He's had her as an 8. He's had her as a 10. There's another positional logjam that Portland is dealing with, and so she's probably never been able to get settled. But it comes down to fine margins at a position like this, and she is less mobile and less, I don't want to say unpredictable, but you get more of a wide range of dangerous skills, I think, with Macario, Lavelle, and Shaw than you do with Moultrie. The thing that national team players always talk about is that the way you succeed at the national team is being consistent every single day. Even though she may be getting better in Portland over the last 3 or 4 games, the season in the aggregate has not been that.
I agree with all of this. I think that of your alternates, I'm probably bumping...
Did you put Bethune in instead of Moultrie?
Yeah, for sure. Bethune is having the kind of season that you just can't ignore.
Yeah.
And she continues to be having it. And I think if you wanted me to like overplay my hand and do like Galaxy Brain roster, I'm dropping like Rose Lavelle and I'm putting Corey Bethune in the 18. Rose Lavelle's not healthy enough. Corey Bethune is setting the world afire. I just think that she has to be an alternate.
I love that from a developmental standpoint. That would really reveal that Hayes looks at the Olympics as a development and a long-term growth opportunity rather than a medal-winning opportunity if you put Bethune in the 18. I would have been more comfortable going along with that logic or even sticking her in as an alternate if she had been capped this week, and she wasn't. And granted, Moultrie has not suited up for the U.S. since the Gold Cup. So it's not like Moultrie's been getting a lot of international minutes either, but Moultrie has them. If we're talking about an alternate who's probably not actually going to make the bench, that's the one thing that I think would make me take Moultrie over Bethune. But you're right. I mean, Bethune has been undeniable. It's just been incredible. And it's through no fault of her own that she doesn't have senior international experience already. She blew out her ACL twice in back-to-back years when she was 17 and 18. Like, it completely threw her development timeline off, and that's why she's not been able to get to this level until now when she's 23. However, I think the friendlies that they play in the fall, once this tournament is over, Bethune's there, Bethune's capped, Bethune lights the world on fire. I completely believe all of that will happen. But for this small thing, which is taking an alternate who will not likely dress for any Olympic game, I think I take Moultrie just because she's got the caps. Let's talk about Lavelle. I thought she was pretty good on Saturday. I thought she did not look very good on Tuesday. She's got the fitness history. She also got her 100th cap, and the team is lousy with number 10s who can also play as wingers. I think that it's fine to take her because it's not just a matter of seniority winning the day. I think she's still worthy of being on an 18-player Olympics roster. I think the talent is still there.
I worry about the nature of that tournament very specifically, the number of games you play in the short window of games you play and her fitness history.
I couldn't agree more.
It's like expecting a Lamborghini to win an endurance race.
Yeah, and I think that's why I keep her on the bench, and if she gets hurt in training or gets hurt in a substitute appearance, which sadly is more likely than not, then you have maybe Moultrie or Bethune as your alternate who can then slide in. Maybe where I would not agree with Hayes is if Lavelle was your day one starter and your go-to starter. That might be a bridge too far for me. But also, of all the disagreements I've had about U.S. lineups over the years, if Lavelle was your day one starter when the Olympics began as your number 10, I wouldn't be upset about that. Life is short. I can be upset about other things.
Yeah, also things we can't know are like fitness. If Rose Lavelle has a clean bill of health and is assessed to be 90 minutes ready, or at least 75 minutes ready,
Yeah.
neither of us have any issue with Rose Lavelle, the player. Rose Lavelle, the player, is a magician when fit.
And you're lucky at this position that you are so deep, and this actually is this weird headache of embarrassment of choice, because actually Lavelle and Macario don't need to be 90 minutes fit. They can be 60 minutes fit, and then you can bring on whoever's on the bench, and it'll still be pretty great.
For me, Lavelle is only sort of getting back into it on a club level.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she could be at full fitness by the time the Olympics roll around. It's just, she'd have to have no setbacks between here and
Yeah,
there.
I wrote about it in the piece that she's not been very good with Gotham. You know, there's a massive caveat. It's a very small sample size, but that's also the point. When she got injured in April of last year, from that moment forward, if you look at every possible competition that she could be in, regular season, Challenge Cup, playoffs, World Cup, International Friendlies, Gold Cup, She Believes Cup, all of it, she's only played about 20% of the available minutes. That kind of says it all.
When you have a tournament where you just can't have your roster diminished any further.
Yeah. Again, 6 games in 17 days is a gauntlet.
Yeah, you need the players who aren't going to redline and burst.
And Lavelle, unfortunately, is a possibility there.
If you wanted me to flip out the alternates, I probably still don't take Corbin Albert. I suspect Emma Hayes does. I do take Sam Staub at a higher position, but I think Emma Hayes should take her at least as an alternate.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Moultrie has not demonstrated the form of late, but I also think she's just absolutely one for the future. And with Lavelle Macario above there, she's one who's blooded, so I don't mind that. You know what else isn't a big deal?
Expected own goals.
Expected own goals.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Be sure to rate us, review us, follow us wherever you get podcasts. Rate us 5 stars if you are going to rate us at all. Follow us on social channels at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. And if you believe we've made an own goal, not about Alex Morgan, email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. Back to our regularly scheduled programming next week on Tuesday, which we're very excited about.